Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Unsolicited Rambles and Distracted Thoughts, and today let's talk about the dangers of self-help. Now, this is kind of like a continuation of another video that I did on the subject of why it's dangerous to be perfect, why it's dangerous to subscribe to a value that seems entirely too good to be true. And if you just take 20 minutes on self-help YouTube channels or self-help Instagram accounts, you'll start to notice this homogenous pool of people doing exactly the same set of things. For example, now you need to wake up early, you need to drink a lot of water, you need to go to the gym, stay in shape, and you need to do these things that are very beneficial. And you have these pools of people doing exactly the same kind of things, and they post on their stories, hey, I just worked out, hey, I just went there, hey, I just came back from a business meeting. And all of a sudden you start to get that high school effect of like all the cool kids, they look a certain way, they speak a certain way, and they dress a certain way. And all these cool kids from self-help circles, they certainly do look alike, they think alike, and they talk alike. And that is what I want to deconstruct today on this video. Why do we feel this need to be someone else, and what is exactly the danger in following some of these rules or principles of self-help blindly? The first question that we really have to ask is, are these methods valid? Are these tips and tricks on personal development valid? After reading the title of today's video, you're probably already conjuring up a comment below and telling me, hey, some of these tips, they do work. What's wrong with running 5K every morning? What's wrong with eating healthier? What's wrong with doing A, B, C, D, F, G that are kind of like a part of the self-help scheme? And that is really the first danger of self-help, which is that these tips, they do work, and they do to some extent produce results. And my critique today has very little to do with whether or not these rules and strategies, whether or not they actually work, but my critique here has everything to do with the attitude we face these strategies and tips with. And for this critique to make sense, here's a left turn into the land of philosophy. Today we're going to meet two very interesting human beings. One of them, his name was Levi-Strauss, Claude Levi-Strauss, and another one, his name was Jacques Derrida. Claude Levi-Strauss, as an anthropologist, was very much interested in human myths, very much interested in anthropology, and very much interested in the languages behind these myths. The umbrella that Claude Levi-Strauss was working under was called structuralism. And a very boiled down definition of structuralism is that people kind of realize that there's a structure to some of the things that, didn't seem to have a structure before. For example, language, for example, art, for example, literature. So these academics and very smart people, they jumped on the wagon and they try to find all of these structures hidden within languages, hidden within pieces of art, and hidden within, well, in Levi-Strauss's case, human myths. And Jacques Derrida, if you haven't heard of Jacques Derrida already, was basically one of the founding fathers of post-structuralism. So imagine if Claude Levi-Strauss and his band of boys, they're busy trying to find out some structure, hidden structures. Well, and Derrida's job is basically to come in and tell these people, hey, the structure that you're looking for basically doesn't exist. And keep in mind, that is a gross simplification of post-structuralism and structuralism. So if you want to read more into this subject, well, I've linked you two very, very good resources in the description down below. The main piece of literature that we're taking a look at today is called Structure, Sign, and Play by Jacques Derrida himself. And if you're looking for a relatively easygoing introduction to structuralism and post-structuralism, well, this is kind of like your entry ticket to understanding Jacques Derrida's deconstruction. This essay right here was basically a head-to-head between Derrida and Claude Levi-Strauss. And Derrida, in a sense, cited a lot of Strauss's research into human myths and in his attempt to create a structure for human myths. And in one of the sections, Jacques Derrida and Levi-Strauss, they both admitted that to create a structure out of, in this context, a human language, you don't actually have to have all the data out in the field to construct a theory out of something. And that's one of the reasons why structuralism failed. And that's one of the reasons why it is so hard to create a definitive structure for something that's so dynamic, like a language, like pieces of art. As Claude Levi-Strauss himself stated, unless the population dies out physically or morally, this totality is never complete. You might as well criticize a linguist for compiling a grammar of a language without having complete records of the words pronounced since the language came into being, and without knowing what will be said in it during the future part of its existence. Experience proves that a linguist can work out the grammar of a given language from a remarkably small number of sentences. Should fresh data come to hand, they will be used to check or modify the formulation of certain grammatical laws, so that some are abandoned and replaced by new ones. but in no instance would I feel constrained to accept the arbitrary demand for a total mythological pattern, since, as has been shown, such a requirement has no meaning. Hence, in a sense, to do structuralist research in the humanities, for example, if you're a literary critic, if you're a literature professor, or if you're a philosophy professor, or you're a linguist, your entire job is basically based upon this anxiety of discovering something that will just completely throw your previous theory out of the window. Now, if you're still here, you might be wondering, how does this apply to self-help? Why are we even talking about this? Well, do you remember those lists of rules, or lists of, you need to wake up in the morning and this is going to do you good, you need to do this in this situation, you need to do that in that situation? If you read a self-help book, you're probably going to pick up like, at least a dozen of these rules or these strategies and these kind of like overarching structures on how you should think and how you should act. But doesn't that sound rather familiar? Personal development is, in a sense, just like philosophy, because it's like a simpler form of philosophy, is trying to research one's own surroundings as to derive rules, theories, and best practices. And I'm not exactly saying that these rules won't work. In certain cases, they certainly do work. That's why they're selling so many books. I'm just saying these rules and strategies, they have inherent limits. They're too simple to be applied to everyday situations. Even for very rigorous fields like linguistics, like literary criticism, and of course even physics, there are degrees of uncertainty. So a law in physics and a law, for example, in the study of linguistics or grammatical rules, they're constantly under revision. They're constantly under the influence of the external world. Should empirical evidence disprove one of your theories, well, you kind of have to change your theory. And with self-help, because so much of it came from people that are not exactly qualified in their fields, so much of it came from people that don't exactly have the right credentials to write these rules, there's a real danger for us to conform to these rules very much blindly, without realizing that tomorrow, something might happen to you that's going to throw this rule out entirely. The problem is really this. With self-help, you feel the need to cling on to a sense of personal identity. You feel the need to feel special. You feel this need to be something. And you feel this need to conform to this arbitrary idea of being perfect. And that is exactly what I'm criticizing. Every one of us, we live by different values. We live by different systems. We have different desires. We have different things that we want out of life. But if you just blindly hold yourself to a set of rules that you've heard from some guru that's making millions of dollars, that's a recipe for disaster. It's making that guy a lot of money, but it is driving you into this cycle of guilt, cycle of shame, just because you're not that perfect thing. Personal development, at least for me, should be a zigzagging. You should never be certain about anything, and there's really no certainty in anything. Tomorrow you might read a book that will throw your entire life out of the window. Tomorrow you might meet someone that will also throw your entire life out of the window. And you have to adjust your internal rules to external circumstances. You have to allow this paradox of you need to read just enough to experience life, and you have to be humble enough for life to change you in some way. Through this very careful balancing act between critical thinking and experiencing life directly, could you really find out something that really truly works for you? Could you really reclaim your individuality, so to speak? Could you really escape that entire arena of people that are all waking up at 5 a.m., all going to the gym, all speaking in the same obnoxious way? That is what I really want for you. Never take a book too seriously. Never take any rule as gospel. Always have this ability to question. Question institutional rules, question rules from the self-help community, question rules even from me. I'm not prescribing you anything. And never ever feel the need to subscribe to some external role model, because that is one of the most dangerous things ever. And that concludes my critique of self-help from the perspective of Derrida and Claude Lévi-Strauss. And this is episode number 3 of Booknotes. For now, I am signing off, and thank you for watching today's video, and I'll see you next time.